Okay, so for lesson number 5, we're actually going to take a look at something called mErgency bot. So for the last couple lessons, we have actually learned how to tell the mBot how to do something. We have learned how to use the LED lights, and we have also learned how to use the the integrated speakers to tell the mBot how to play certain tones and basically teach it how to play a simple melody. For this new lesson, however, we're going to use for the first time a sensor. If you've never used a sensor it's basically a device that allows the mBot to detect changes in the physical world, and it's going to send us that information back, and we're going to be able to use that information in our programs. So let's take a look. So for this lesson, actually, we're going to use the light sensor. It's a sensor that detects the light levels in a room, and it returns us a value that's basically between 1 and 1024, depending on how strong the light levels are in a room. And we're going to use that to tell the mBot how to do something in case the light levels go down up to a certain level. Okay, for the requirements of this program, all we're going to use, it's the integrated speakers, a LED light, and of course the light sensor that we're going to use. This program is going to have these objectives, which is basically measure the available light in room, and once the light level drops under a certain threshold, it doesn't have to be 20%, but in this case I just wrote 20% as an example. It's going to do something. In this case it can be a sound or it could be LED. In this program we're going to do both. It's going to alternate blinking each LED, as like we did in the lesson number 3, blinking LEDs, and it's going to turn off the sound and the LED lights once the light level rises above the threshold that we define. Okay, so a little bit about the analysis of how we're going to do this program. First thing it's that we have to know is that once in every room the light levels are different and they vary. So what we have to do for this program is actually calculate the average light available in a room. If you don't know a lot about mathematics, an average is calculated by taking multiple measurements, adding them all up, and divided by the amount of measurements that we take. So in this case, we're going to take 10 measurements in a span of 10 seconds, and then add them all up and divide them by 10. That's going to give us our average level of light in a room. Then we're going to use that average level to define a threshold, which is basically a point at which if the light goes under that certain level of light, it's when our mBot is going to do something. In this case, for example, let's say there's a light level of 1000, and that would represent our 100% light level in a room. If we wanted to say that the mBot should react once the light levels go under 80% of light available, so that means that once the mBot detects or returns a value of 800 or less than 800, the mBot is going to react to or whatever we program it to do. And we do this by calculating our average, multiplying by whatever we want our threshold to be. If we want 80%, we multiply by 0.8, and then we subtract that value from the original average. However, don't worry, we're going to take a look to this in more detail once we start programming this, and also during the flowchart, which is what we're going to do now. So in case you want to take a look at the flowchart, this is what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to set a couple variables that we need for our program. One is called an accumulator, which is going to start in 0. We're also going to set a loop counter that's also going to start at 0. And this part right here is what we would call a for loop, which is a loop where we know the amount of times we want it to run. In this case, we want to take 10 measurements, so we're going to program our mBot to do this 10 times. As you can see, what the mBot has to do, it's read the light intensity, then it's going to add this level to our accumulator, which starts at 0. So let's say it reads 10. Now the accumulator, it's up to 10, and then we're going to add our loop counter plus 1. So if it started at 0, now it's going to be 1, and then it's going to do this part. I don't think we've used this block in any flowcharts before this program, but this is basically the block that helps us to define a decision that we're going to make in our programs. As you can see, it can have two different ways it can take. One is if this is true, and the other one is that if this condition is not true. So at this point in our program, it's going to decide, or it's going to take a look if the loop counter is less than 10. In this case, our loop counter, as I told you, it's going to be 1 at this point. So this is going to be true because our loop counter is less than 10. So it's going to go back at this point and repeat these 3 actions again up until it's 10. Once this is 10, this is going to take a look and it's going to say, is this loop counter less than 10? And that's going to return false because 10 is equal to 10. It's not less than 10. So we're going to go on this path that says no. And at this point, we're also using a connector, which is basically just sending us to this part here that says A, and that part over here. This is just used to expand your flowcharts horizontally, so we can use space more efficiently. If we wanted to write this underneath, it would be just a very, very long flowchart, which we don't want. So what happens here is that now we're going to calculate our mean. To calculate our mean, as I already told you, we take the accumulator and divide it by 10 because we took 10 measurements. But we will take a look at this a little more closely once we start the program. And then we're also going to calculate the threshold, similar to what I told before. And we're going to take a look at that again in the program. Lastly, for the light intensity, at this point we're going to enter what it's called infinite loop. This is what our mBot is going to be doing infinitely until it runs out of battery or we turn off the mBot. And what it does is that it's going to read the light intensity every second, I think, and it's going to determine if the light intensity is less than our threshold. If this is true, then it's going to turn the LEDs and the alarm tone on, basically to alert us, hey, there's not enough light. Of course, if the light levels are okay or more than a threshold, it's going to turn off the alarm tone and the LEDs, and it's going to be doing this infinitely. Okay, so now let's take a look at how to do this program. So first let's open our mBlock. This may take a while. All right. So now, as I told you before, and I'm gonna keep repeating this for those programs, it's better to program your mBlock in Arduino mode because that way you can take a quick look at what's going on here, even though you may not understand most of what is going on, like me. But it's good to keep this thing in mind. Then, to start an mBot program, we're going to go to the section that says robots and select the block that says mBot program. This is going to start everything we need here automatically. But for now, we're actually going to take a look at our variables and make a block. We've used this once before, but I'm going to give a quick explanation again. On mBlock, it's basically a function that we can use in our programs. If you're going to make your code a little cleaner, a little more easy to understand, you can do this. In this case, we're going to create a block called initialization. Initialization, yeah, it's a hard word to pronounce. So you're gonna go there, press OK. So what we're going to write under this code, here's where we're going to define all our variables and all our readings that we're going to use. We're going to create a variable called accumulator. There we go. And we're going to use this block that says set. So this basically tells the program to begin this variable as 0. And what we're going to do now is go to the control section of our blocks and go to the repeat. This is basically a for loop, and the number right here, it tells your program how many times it has to execute whatever code is underneath here. So in this case, what we want is to create another variable that's called light intensity. Okay, and similar to what we did up in the accumulator, we're going to use the block that says set, and we're going to set this to a reading from our sensor like we're going to use. All you have to do is go here and find the block that says light sensor. Here it is, light sensor. There. Let me go a little closer so it's easier to read. So we're going to set our light intensity to the light sensor that it's on board. This sounds a little bit redundant, but it's so the mBot knows, because you may connect your light sensor to different port. But I think this one actually in the mBot becomes already connected, so all you have to do is set it as default, which says light sensor on board. And then we're going to set our accumulator again to, we're going to use for the first time our operator blocks. As you can see, they are basically our math functions that you would use any day on other things, like for example the plus one that we're going to use right now. It's going to add these things. So now that we have our variables, we can actually use them. For example, like this, we're going to add our accumulator to our light intensity. So what's going to happen here is, for example, the beginning of the program, well, not yet, but if we call this function right here on our program initialization, what's going to happen is that the first time it's going to set our accumulator to 0, and then it's going to read the light sensor value from the light sensor and set it to whatever it returns. So let's say it returns 10. If it returns 10, what it's going to do, oh, should be accumulator, sorry. What it's going to do, it's going to add that 10 here to the accumulator, so this becomes 10. And this it's going to happen 10 times. So the second time, it's going to read again, and let's say it returns 5. And once it returns 5, it's going to go here, and it's going to set our accumulator to the previous value that it had, which was 10, plus the current value of the light intensity, which is 5, so that's 15. And it's going to set that to 15. And then it's going to keep repeating that 10 times. What we have to do now to calculate our average or a mean is go to make a new variable and call it mean. Press OK. And we're going to set mean. So we're going to set our mean to another operator, which is going to be this one for division. There you go. Our division is going to go then be our accumulator. Nope. There you go. Divided by the number of values that we took. Since we know we took 10, we can just write here 10. Okay. And now we're going to make a last variable called light threshold. Okay. So, and we're going to set it here as well to be our mean. Hold on. We're also going to multiply. It's this one. We're going to use our mean multiplied by whatever value we want our threshold to be. So let's say we want, in this case, if it goes times, we want it to go, if it goes under 20% of our original mean of light level, then it's going to trigger whatever we want to do. So let's set our threshold to 0.8. That's going to return our threshold. So now that we have all that, this is going to run first. That's why we called it here. It's important to know that once you are defining your own block, in this case this one called initialization, this is not going to do anything unless you call it in your main program, which is the mBot program right here. That's why we need this block from here to put it right here. However, right now it's not doing anything other than the initialization. What we have to do now is go to our control and use this block that says forever to set a forever loop or a while loop. That's going to be true always, and we're going to create another block. I called it check check for blackout. Okay, and we're going to call it right here. All right, there you go. So this block, after we have initialized everything, so the mBot program is going to run this code, which is all of this, and then it's going to run this forever, which is our check blackout. And here in check blackout, we're going to define when it's going to trigger our LED lights and the sound that we're going to define, and what it's going to do, which is the LED lights and the sound. So first of all, we're going to use something called a conditional. So a conditional could be this one, and well, there are others, but let's just use this right now. They're basically, the others are a combination of these two. Oh, sorry, I meant to use this one. If then else, okay. And we're going to use another arithmetic operator, which is more like a arithmetic comparison. This is going to check if something is less than something. In this case, what we want to do is use again our light sensor from here, and if our light sensor is less than our light threshold. Okay, so what's going on right now, since this is running forever, the mBot is going to be reading forever, every second, let's say, for simplicity, the value returned by your light sensor, and it's going to compare it to your light threshold that we defined here. And then if this is true, it's going to execute whatever code is here, and if it's false, it's going to execute whatever code is here. So for now, what we're going to do, it's very similar to what we did in the Jazzy bot, which is play a simple tone. In this case, the tone is not going to be as interesting and jazzy as we did in the Jazzy bot, but it's going to be more annoying, like an alarm, so that whoever's in the room, if the lights go out, if maybe they're asleep, they get annoyed by the tone and they can wake up and do whatever they have to do because the light went off. So we're going to use this one for simplicity, called play tone on node C4. If you'd like, you could do like you did in the Jazzy bot and define the play function. However, since that's not the focus right now of this program, we're going to use this one that's simple, that says play tone on node, and let's do it on B7 just for this case, and it's going to be an 8. Don't worry about this, this could be anything that you want. This is just, I did it so that it can sound like an alarm. So now let's copy, duplicate, paste again, and now F7. Again, you could use any tone you want. You just have to I'm just decided to use these because I wanted this to be like an alarm system. Lastly, we're going to set LED on board here. Okay, LED left to red, copy, paste, and set the other one now right to blue. Okay, now I think that in the program, how I defined it here is that we're going to, I said that they could be alternating, but let's just skip that part for now, just to show how this program is supposed to work. And let's just set those LED lights on once the light levels go under the threshold. So once you have, this is what it's going to happen if the value returned from your light sensor is less than your light threshold. However, we have to say this as well. Set LED on board a couple times. Oh, actually, I guess this could just say all to 0, 0, 0, so it turns all lights off. Okay, and that's basically your program. So this portion right here is important as well, because if you didn't use this or included this portion of the code in your program, once the light sensor return was less than the light threshold, once this is true, it's going to turn this on, but once the light levels go up again above the threshold, this would stay on. So this is important just so your mBot knows to turn the lights off once your light levels go back to normal. And so again, to explain how the flow of the program goes, first your main program needs to be called. It's going to call your initialization function, which is going to set up your variables like the accumulator. It's going to read the values returned by your light sensor 10 times and add it to your accumulator, which is going to be divided then by 10 because you took 10 measurements, and that's going to calculate your mean. By multiplying your mean times 0.8, you get what would be the 80% of your normal light levels. And once this is all done, your mBot is going to run this code forever, which is this one right here, check for blackout, which is going to evaluate a comparison between reading your light sensor values. If this value is less than your light threshold, then it's going to play these two tones, this tone, and it's going to turn its LED lights on to alert you that your light levels are under 80%. And lastly, if your light levels are above 80%, it's going to turn all LEDs off and it's not going to play anything. Well, as usual, the last part of every time you program something is to make sure that it works. In this case, once you turn on your mBot, basically wait 10 seconds for it to take your measurements and calculate all your values. And once 10 seconds are passed, all you have to do is basically turn off your lights and it should work. But actually, since I know where the sensor is and it's at the top of the mBot, even if your shadow steps over it, it should trigger like that. You can see my shadow and it works, but it would be better. Yeah, it would be better if you turn your lights off. So check it out and see you next lesson.